The Chronic Illness Therapist podcast is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learned here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. This podcast is meant for educational purposes only. For specific questions related to your unique circumstances, please contact a licensed medical professional in your state of residence. Samina Qureshi is the founder and registered dietitian at Wholesome Start, a weight-inclusive GI nutrition practice based in Houston, Texas. She specializes in helping people who struggle with irritable bowel syndrome find relief and nourish their bodies without rigid diets, stress, guilt, or shame. Wonderful, right? Samina respects body diversity and encourages her clients to care for their health in a gentle way that best honors their lifestyle, unique needs, and cultural traditions. Through nutrition coaching, her clients are able to heal their relationship with food, find relief from really uncomfortable gut symptoms, and support long-term gut health without the gimmicks. As you all know, this podcast, I interview other licensed medical professionals because there's so much wild misinformation on the internet about how to be healthy, how to heal chronic illnesses, how to optimize your health, how to blah, 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 blah. There's so much, and it gets really confusing. And while I do think there's a lot to be said about the history of scientists, licensed professionals, doctors, and the harm that has been done in these fields, we address those in our programs. I know in my program specifically, we talked about things like the Tuskegee experiments. We talked about things that therapists and psychologists and scientists have done that have been incredibly disgusting and harmful. We talk about those things because talking about them is the only way to make sure that they don't happen again. And so, I've been approached by coaches who want to be interviewed on this podcast. And I even had one that was pretty upset with me and thought I was basically being exclusionary by not letting her on my podcast because she didn't have a license. And the fact of the matter is there are so many podcasts out there that you are more than welcome to listen to that are filled with people talking about things that they don't really truly understand. And so we do go to school for a long time, and we stay up to date on research, and we are constantly, not only the academic texts and the journals, and not only do we stay up to date with that, but we are also chronically online just like the rest of you. So we see the myths and the misconceptions and the disinformation that's spread. And I feel really passionate about trying to dispel some of these myths because I was really harmed in the course of my own treatments, trying to follow these rigid routines that were never going to work for me. So I hope that you enjoy this episode with Samina. We are going to do a workshop together eventually, a live workshop, one of the ones that I do monthly, and it's going to be really great. And if you are participating in Ramadan this year, definitely check out Samina's profile. She is doing these tips on how to stay healthy and basically feed your gut the way that you should while fasting in Ramadan. She has a free download that you can go to her website and enter your email and it will come right to your inbox. So without further ado, here's our interview.
Hi, my name is Samina Qureshi. I'm a registered dietitian based in Houston, Texas, and I have a private practice called Wholesome Start Nutrition Counseling, where I work with individuals who struggle with GI disorders, specifically IBS, find relief without rigid diet, stress, guilt, or shame. So if you're someone who's struggled with their relationship with food from a history of eating disorders or currently struggling with your relationship with food and body image, and you also experience these uncomfortable digestive symptoms, I'm your dietitian.
What is the most rewarding or fascinating part about working with this condition in particular?
Yeah, so I think like if you type in like gut health nutrition on Google, the first thing you're going to get is a bunch of restrictions on what you cannot eat. And so, what I love about working with this population is there are so many opportunities to truly expand your diet, be more inclusive with the foods that you're allowing yourself to eat to find relief. It really isn't about restriction and helping people get to that aha moment where it's not all about elimination of foods is my passion. That is what I love.
Do you do you employ elimination diets, but with that in mind, or are you anti-elimination diet, or can you talk a little bit about your approaches?
Right. Yeah. So, the medical nutrition therapy that is recommended for people with IBS, there's something called the low FODMAP diet. It works for about 2 out of 3 people who struggle with IBS. Predominantly, I would say IBS diarrhea subtype. It is an elimination style diet, right? You reduce total FODMAPs consumed to see if you can improve your symptoms. And then there is a reintroduction phase to identify foods that you may not tolerate. And then you expand your diet and kind of liberalize your diet as much as tolerated. And while this is a effective nutrition protocol for some, for people who struggle with eating disorders and a history of eating disorders, it kind of it's contraindicated, right? It's not warranted for someone who struggles with restriction or strict purge behaviors and things like that. And so, how I approach managing IBS is something called the gentle FODMAP approach, which isn't a rigorous or restrictive, super restrictive way of managing FODMAPs. It's looking at your diet to see, like, hey, do you even eat FODMAPs or these highly fermentable carbohydrates regularly in your diet? And if so, here are some swaps. So instead of saying eliminate them forever, it's okay, I noticed that you're having coffee with regular cow's milk every morning and you're running to the bathroom having diarrhea immediately. Instead of avoiding all milk, it's why don't we opt for a lower lactose variety? And that may be cow's milk with the lactase enzyme added in, so it's lactose free, and seeing how that impacts your symptoms. So it's taking it step by step, taking the overwhelm away from nourishing your body and finding solutions that are practical that work for you. Because when you struggle with your relationship with food, restriction can be triggering.
It is, yeah, and I think we should talk a little bit more about that. I am curious about a logistic though. Do people tend to see like they eat a food? You mentioned like the coffee example, and you're running to the bathroom right after. Is it also true that what you're eating can impact you hours or days later, or is it a pretty quick noticing?
Yeah. So in general, FODMAPs, which I guess we should do a little education, right? FODMAPs is an acronym that stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, which are those sugar alcohols, right? And for some people with IBS, they can be sensitive to them. And actually, you're right. It's not necessarily true that if you eat a FODMAP, you're immediately going to have a symptom minutes later, right? The symptoms can happen maybe 3 to 4 hours later because these FODMAPs are fermented in the small intestine, and it does take time from entering our mouth to go through digestion and make it there. So you may not notice symptoms immediately. The thing with coffee is that it can be a gastric irritant in itself, and lactose specifically may have a shorter time with the symptoms that you experience, right? So if you are a lactose intolerant, you may notice it 30 minutes to an hour later um, after consuming.
Okay, okay. And what about days later? And this might not even be FODMAP related, but just in general with food. Like, is it possible for people? This is what I've heard that makes it people hard for people to figure out what their sensitivities are because maybe days later something is showing up, but I've also heard that that's not true. And so I'm just trying to fact check here.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. So I think it depends on each individual and how many co occurring conditions they're managing. Right. So if we're only talking about FODMAPs and IBS with those sensitivities or intolerances, I would say, yeah, you can experience symptoms days a day later. It just depends on the quantity of that food that you consume and also FODMAP stacking. So if you're having it multiple times throughout the day, then you're experiencing symptoms and then the lingering symptoms can happen. And oftentimes, when you trigger IBS symptoms and flares, what happens? Like our nervous system goes into this overdrive where it's scared. You don't want to have these symptoms anymore. And it kind of ends up with this cycle of then fearing food, having the symptoms, and it becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy almost of like, I'm fearful, I don't want to eat, I have symptoms, and then that just continues. And so is it truly the food that's causing you to have these symptoms or the state of your nervous system in that moment?
Yeah, which is such a hard I feel like it makes it so complicated. Do you have a way that you make this simpler for people to understand? And not from a just like you just explained it very simply and very well, but from a place of how I track that in my body. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
or does it
absolutely.
require a good amount of effort?
So most of the clients that I work with are working with me minimum for 3 months. They're getting high accountability and support with the program that I'm working with them in. And so in my, IBS Food Freedom program, they're getting this hand holding and coaching and support along the way as we identify their food triggers, reintroduce foods, assess their personal tolerance. And so there is a component of food and symptom journaling, and that helps me better understand their symptoms in real time. That way, if I notice, like, hey, after having XYZ meals, I'm noticing these are your symptoms. Why don't we offer this swap? And so absolutely, it can be so overwhelming and impossible to do on your own. That's why I offer this like high touch support because the low FODMAP diet, it's it does not produce results as effectively as it would if you did alongside a trained FODMAP dietitian.
That makes sense. Can you even name some of the things that differentiate someone trying to do a low FODMAP diet on their own versus working with someone like you? Is it really just is it just the support of it all is what helps the success, or are there just more nuances that you understand because of your training and education that you're just not going to find in the blogs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had people who have tried the low FODMAP diet on their own, and I will say 100% of my clients have failed, right? Like that's why they're working with me to navigate it on
Exactly.
their own. And the reason is because it's overwhelming. There's a lot of nuanced things, right? It's not just FODMAPs that are causing you these symptoms. Like I said, there could be potentially other gastric irritants. There could also be malnourishment going on, in
Yeah.
inconsistent meal patterns, stress during meal times, and so many other lifestyle factors that could be contributing to their symptoms. So while understanding, FODMAPs and whether or not they're a trigger for you, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before even approaching the FODMAP side of things with managing IBS. So laying that foundation of good, balanced nutrition
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't stress you out, to be honest.
What happens if this stuff just does stress you out over and over again? What do we do about that?
Yeah, so that's why I partner and also collaborate very closely with their mental health practitioners, whether it be a therapist or a counselor, to make sure that the people that I'm working with are getting supported where they need, right? As a dietitian, I offer nutrition counseling and support and coaching. But that, if you are noticing that this stuff is increasing your anxiety. You're very anxious about it. I also refer out to GI psychology because when it comes to managing IBS, gut directed hypnotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapies for IBS or GI focused have been proven to be as effective as a low FODMAP diet. So if
Wow.
I'm seeing that, hey, you know what? As we're working together, we've gone through the minimum 3 months of working together trying these approaches, you're still experiencing symptoms, we have to recognize that something else is going on.
It's good to hear that 3 months mark is kind of where like, you should be seeing something after 3 months, and if not, then we're missing something.
Absolutely. And one thing I will say, so remember when I was talking to you about how like 100% of my patients have failed the low FODMAP diet? Well, if you want to go and try the low FODMAP diet on your own, go for it. Right? Of course, you need to assess and see how this is going to work with your lifestyle and needs. But this is something that GI doctors or physicians don't tell you, right? They just hand you the packet of the low FODMAP foods and they're like, avoid these foods and run with it.
Yeah.
They never say that there's a reintroduction phase. They never say that this is a short term diet. So the elimination phase of that low FODMAP diet should only be done for 2 to 4 weeks.
That's crazy.
If you are not experiencing symptom improvement by week 2, stop the low FODMAP diet.
That is such like yeah, I think people try this for, like, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, like, this might be a pivot. What do you think of the GAPS diet?
I have heard of it. I'm not as familiar, but I will say that there's no concrete evidence in showing results in large populations. So that these studies
Okay.
haven't been done enough for me to speak about it like with enough knowledge.
Okay, okay, that's fair. That's good to know too. Like the FODMAP has been empirically studied and we do have a lot of data around it. And so with the GAPS diet, like if somebody has had success with that, that's amazing. We just don't have
Yeah.
the data to show. And we do know that FODMAP diet works with support.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will say is like, um, we're talking about food sensitivities and intolerances, right? And a lot of people come to me going on a low FODMAP diet for years. So they are starving their gut bacteria of these amazing fiber-rich foods that actually support their microbiome and their gut health for years. And they are limited to such small amount, even small list of foods, like 3 foods that they're comfortable eating,
Yeah.
right? And so what I wanted to say was there's a lot of information out there on what to restrict and nothing on how to add back to their diets, right?
Yeah.
What foods can you safely introduce? What foods can you add to just baseline offer yourself that consistent and adequate nourishment so that your GI system can function optimally? Right. What I see is with this overlap of eating disorders and GI disorders is that, and in research, you'll see this, is that GI function suffers immediately when there is any form of restriction,
Yeah.
right? Your GI motility slows down. That means that you're constipated. That means the constipation is going to cause you that extra acid reflux and bloating and gas and stomach pain. And once that constipation has been sitting there for a long time, there's that backflow of diarrhea. So there, it's just um,
Yeah.
really hard. And so adding more restriction to that
Yeah.
is not the solution.
I love that. Yes. It's very validating to hear that. Like, and I think people really need to hear that more because a lot of the wellness content is about, like online, is really about restricting,
Mhm.
even from some medical professionals. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think of another. I still want to expand on this concept of like adding foods back in and basically what a healthy, wholesome diet looks like. Because yeah, I think that whole concept of, well, fiber hurts my stomach and, you know, all of that is so real. So with going low FODMAP for 2 to 4 weeks with support, um, is it that what we want to, that then the goal is to start adding fiber back in and like we should see improvement, or how does that look?
Yeah. So the goal is not to just like bombard your system with fiber. Anytime that you introduce a plant based food, obviously a source of fiber, you are going to experience some type of GI symptom, whether it be excess gas or bloating, hopefully not stomach pain, and hopefully not diarrhea or constipation, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. And so when I'm working with my patients, again, I don't jump straight to the FODMAP diet because we have to lay this foundation of adequate nourishment. And so, what does a balanced diet look like then? It is eating consistently every 3 to 4 hours. And that could look like breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, and dinner. The reason that I do this is to recalibrate the GI system and your nervous system to know that I am going to be fed regularly and consistently throughout the day. So I do not need to slow down my GI system. I don't need to hold on to foods because I know when I'm going to be fed next.
Yeah.
So my GI system can naturally have that GI motility, have that migrating motor complex move so that it can push the food through your GI system, create a stool, and evacuate.
Yeah.
Right. And so once I feel like you have gotten the routine of nourishing your body down, then we go to, hey, I'm noticing with this consistency of nourishment, you're still experiencing XYZ symptoms. And this is the trend that I'm seeing. Here are some swaps that we can offer. Let's try this out. And let's also, with these swaps, I'm including options that are um, iron soluble fiber. Soluble fiber is something that is going to form like a gel like liquid in your body and as it goes through the digestive system and make a nice lubricated but formed stool to
Yeah.
help it pass easily. And so, yes, step by step. And it's not about throwing fiber at the wall and seeing what sticks literally. It is about having that baseline nutrition and then adding foods in to support the symptoms that you're experiencing.
I love that. So many of my clients, or just even people I work like hear from with any kind of chronic, this is not just IBS related, but it's so hard to get breakfast in. And especially if they're on any kind of ADHD medication, very, very difficult. And so, there's some of that that's like, if you know how important it is, and it really internally, you are intrinsically motivated to start eating 3 meals a day. I went through this a few years ago and I was like, I don't care what happens. I don't care how uncomfortable I am. I don't care how much, like, because I would just have this like feeling of aversion whenever I would try
Yeah.
to eat in the morning.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't care. I need to eat something. So I think I started with like a protein bar or like, I don't even know. It was just something that wasn't like a whole meal. Eventually, it was like, "Oh, what if I just ate foods I liked, like eggs and bacon and toast?" And that was really what helped me start, like, eating breakfast, and then, like you said, I was able to add in more foods and yogurts and things that I
Yeah.
wasn't able to before. Is that kind of what you're helping people get to, or is there? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And I love that you brought up, ADHD and neurodivergence. People who are on these types of medications to manage ADHD, absolutely, it has an impact on your appetite, right? And even if you're not on medication, it can be really hard to complete a task to change and shift to now I need to eat and break away from that thing. So, yes, I work with many people who experience, who are not neurodivergent, who have ADHD, and I love that you tried something and saw how it made you feel, and that you were not aiming for perfection. I think that's where a lot of people struggle is that, like, oh, I need to have breakfast. I need to start my day. Okay, I'm going to get something. I'm going to have this. Yes, I'm going to do oatmeal and I'm going to add all these things and the chia
Yeah,
seeds and it's
I
great
did
and
go through that, by the way.
and
And
it's
then I was like,
wonderful.
"Wait."
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But I love that you opted for something that was convenience. And so that is something that I really, really talk a lot about with my clients is anytime you are making a change to your day, lifestyle, health, taking care of yourself, it has to be easy. So how can we set ourselves up for success? And while bars are great, liquid nutrition can be awesome too.
Yeah,
Right.
my functional doctor always tried to get me to do smoothies and to put my supplement. I just cannot do smoothies, but I'm so glad that a lot of people can because it is a
Yeah.
very easy
And
thing.
even if it's not smoothies, it could be a drink that you get from the store.
Okay.
Right? Or a
Just get
powder
something in.
or just for something, just to have that first step of what does it feel like to put something in my system within an hour of waking up,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And And then we assess how you feel, and then we take the next little step. And a lot of what I do is that accountability and coaching support as well, because we are making a lot of these changes. How do we strategically do this in a way that is accessible and doable and you don't feel overwhelmed?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such individualized work because we all have our different hangups about whether we have different food rules that are hanging us up or different
Yeah.
food aversions or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the food rules, I mean, we live in a wellness culture that loves to put restrictions and rules and real rigid thoughts about how we should do things. And I think like we've lost this idea of like what works for us individually.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about like, oh, well, I saw someone did this and it worked for them, but like you're not them.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, like the things that a lot of people are selling online don't help because that's the marketing that we're constantly hearing. This worked for me. It's even taught like in like business coaches teach it. It's all about like
Hmm.
your audience and let them know this worked for you and this worked for your 10 other clients and therefore it can work for anyone. And it's like that's not a double blind controlled study, but
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought that up because so there's this one condition called dyssynergic defecation. It's a subtype of like constipation, which means that um really your GI system is having a hard time pushing the muscles are having a hard time moving the stool down. And so you may get like some backed up. I'm not a GI doctor, so I don't know the physiology as well. But the treatment for that, a lot of it is helpful with pelvic floor physical therapy. So I partner a lot and I collaborate with a lot of pelvic floor physical therapists. But as this person was working with me, they didn't gain the relief that they were looking for to the extent that they wanted and had hoped for. Right? Like, yes, they added more variety to their diet. They're eating more consistently. They did notice more frequent bowel movements, but upon MRI, they saw that there was still like stools stuck in their system.
wow.
Right. And from there, I am not going to push them and be like, okay, well, you just need to work with me more. You didn't do X, Y, and Z. And that's why this is not working for you,
Right.
like blaming the person. Right.
Yeah.
I said, okay, let me call my friend. I'm going to call Dr. So and so, pelvic floor physical therapist, and we are going to come up with a solution for you because I think this is where we need to pivot now
Yeah.
to see how connecting the muscles and your mind with, relaxing that pelvic floor can help with moving some of that stool down the system.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, yeah, I'm not a magic fix.
Right. This stuff takes such an interdisciplinary team. It takes sometimes PT and nutritionists and counseling and the specialists like GI doctors and yeah,
Hmm.
because yeah, we don't all have the answers for everything. So it takes multiple eyes to get to it. You said something earlier that has stuck with me. Because we talk a lot that right now like nervous system regulation is really hot and I try to be really careful with like how we talk about that because it also becomes one of those things that's like, well, you just need to reset your nervous system and then like everything else will go away.
Yeah.
So you said though, like just eating breakfast, just getting something in, even if it's just a drink from the store, like it lets your body know that food is coming, which creates safety in the body. And that in and of itself is nervous system work. And I think people really need to know that because again, they think it has to be this like really convoluted nervous system boot camp retraining thing. And it doesn't at
Yes.
all.
Oh my God, I love that you picked that up. I mean, obviously you would, of all people, right?
This is like my
This
biggest
is your
soapbox.
specialty. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, caring for your body, meeting your basic human needs is going to help with regulating your nervous system.
Yeah.
And nourishing your body is one of them. And so, how can we make that a priority in our busy, busy, busy lives?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the biggest hurdle. It's like, I know what I need to do. I know that this is going to help me, but what is the step that I need to take to just dip my toe in and
Yep.
see how that makes my body feel?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It really is such a journey. I think about my own journey a lot in this because I didn't really have any of like the words around this. Now I feel like all this stuff is online and people like kind of they see so much like language around this. But when I was going through it, I didn't have a diagnosis. I didn't have a like anything. I kind of just kept trying to follow my intuition and kept trying to follow those basic rules, like just get breakfast in or but it took a long
Yeah.
time to get there. And I also want to ask you about food sensitivity tests because that wrecked me. So I would love to hear your take on that.
Okay, I'm gonna give you my honest truth. They are bogus. Okay?
Yeah.
Food sensitivity testing, and I even have like one of my really good friends is an allergist at our like medical center here in Houston, and she's like, we don't use those in practice. I don't know why people keep coming in with IgG antibody testing to determine food sensitivities when that's not a thing.
Yeah.
In research, IgG antibody testing has been shown to um, indicate foods that you commonly eat, not foods that you're sensitive to. And it's so funny because I have clients come to me with their, you know what brand tests. And they're like, these are all the foods that I can't eat because this company said so. And then they sell you a diet plan that is how to eat, yada, yada, yada. Like, anyways, it's
Yeah.
more money making scheme.
Yeah.
And what we find is that my number one question that I ask people, because I also believe you, right? Like I while I these food sensitivity tests are not validated, they're not evidence-based. I believe you when you tell me that if you eat something, you feel this way. Okay? Like I just want to put that out there. So, with this information that I get from these food sensitivity tests, I ask my patients, did you notice symptoms before this test when eating this food?
Right. Because
Right? Like,
yeah. Yeah.
if you weren't avoiding strawberries before this, there's no need to avoid strawberries now.
Yeah. Yeah. You would have noticed before. Well, I guess that goes back to that question of how long does it take before we notice like something happening? I think that might be what contributes to why these tests feel so hopeful for people because if they feel confused about what's flaring them up, which was where I was at, I was like, I have no food that makes me run to the bathroom. Like that isn't what I'm struggling with. And so taking the test was like, I mean, it was terrifying because it was all of the foods. It was every vegetable that I put into my body. And I was like,
Yep.
I learned, I taught myself how to eat vegetables. And now you're telling me I can't eat any of these. And I think for 2 years, I like avoided vegetables. It was really horrible until I started hearing like, wait, these tests like are not that great. And so yeah, I think it can be hopeful when you're hearing, oh, well, this is the source of your problem. When you aren't attuned, when you don't know what was causing the problem to begin with.
Absolutely. If they're selling that hope, and what I have seen from that, unfortunately, is people coming to me with a very restricted like list of foods that they're able to eat and unknowingly causing themselves to have an eating disorder. And then that layering worsened GI symptoms because of that malnourishment.
Yeah. Yeah, I can attest to that.
So it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. Um, Tell me then, what is like when people come to you with this test, like, what is your response? Like, um, you educate in the way you just did, but then it's like, so here's what we're gonna do next.
Yes. So this is, and I love this because this is where I get to help people identify foods that they actually have symptoms with, or they're triggered by, and then also expand their diet. So we do reintroduction challenges. I say, okay, we're going to continue with your normal diet, whatever you think that makes you feel good. We'll continue with that, and we're going to add in strawberries on day 1. We're going to add in strawberries in a bigger portion on day 3. 2, we're going to add in strawberries on a bigger portion on day 3. Day 4, 5, and 6 are going to be washout period. Let's see if you have any lingering symptoms, right? We're going to assess how you feel to truly and confidently nourish your body and hopefully expand your diet as well. We
Yeah.
notice that, okay, you're eating nothing out of the ordinary and we're just changing one single ingredient food like strawberries and you don't have a reaction. I think we're safe to say that you can tolerate them in a normal portion for you.
Yeah. That's great. Really reducing the fear around food. What are some other food rules that you hear or food ideas or
Yeah.
philosophies?
Oh my God, so many. Here's one. Okay. So intermittent fasting last year was like the thing
Yes.
everybody wanted to not eat forever. When you guys, listen to this. We all fast. We all should be fasting during our sleeping period, right? If we are nighttime sleepers, that means we're sleeping in the night and our body is having that rest and digest moment. And when we wake up, it is important to break our fast so that we can stimulate that GI motility to get going and working and offer it that safety and comfort.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember even, yeah, my functional medicine doctor was like, yeah, for women, like if you're gonna fast, it should be at night. So like you start at like the 6 or 7, and that was when it hit me. I was like, you mean like like that's the norm? That's like what we've been told forever to do.
Yeah, like, you mean go to sleep? Like,
Yeah.
I eat dinner and then I, like, end my night and I sleep and I wake up and I eat again?
Yep.
No.
I know. We make things so complicated. Humans just make things
Yeah.
so complicated.
We're great. No, it's actually, you know what? We love to be trendy and buzzy and exciting, and this is where the marketing world gets us.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And
So
really this
that's
has been
one.
like since forever. I mean, if you look back into like even like into ancient Greek times and anywhere where we have like old especially food philosophies, I'm thinking like who said like heal thyself or food is your medicine. It's like some old ancient kind of
Mhm.
philosopher. But like if
Mhm.
you look back into those histories, there's always some kind of like thing being peddled, like some kind of new medicine thing. So this is something, this is like always existed for humans. It's just on a different level now because we have so much technology and we are a global economy. So we just see it so much now, but it's really nothing new, which I don't know what that says about us, but
Yeah, yeah, or I have the people that do intermittent fasting and then come to me and they're like, "I haven't had a bowel movement in weeks," and I'm like, "Duh,
oh man.
makes sense. You're
Yeah.
not putting anything in, how could anything come out?"
Or I know, and we just get so wrapped up. We get so wrapped up in the hope of these things.
Yeah,
Do you find yourself
absolutely.
like doing that's what a lot of your coaching and education is on, is like kind of just dispelling myths and like do you also find you have to convince people a lot of this kind of stuff too before they'll follow it, or are they just kind of
Wonderful,
yeah ready by the time they
wonderful question. Okay, yeah, so a lot of my nutrition education in session is myth busting. A lot of especially the first few sessions that we have, it's like really breaking down the barriers, understanding your previous food rules and rigidity around food, your relationship with food. If you grew up with a mom who was like, the almond mom type where, okay, you can only have single ingredient foods. You don't need to eat a muffin. I have like, almonds and blueberries. You can eat that. And so we break down these barriers. We dispel myths in these sessions, but also if someone has been wanting to work with me, they are following me on all the medias, social medias, and learning that I am a very, I would say, anti-diet culture dietitian, right? Where I help people really get back in tune with their body and learn how to nourish themselves without that stress, guilt, and shame that comes from society and wellness culture. And so, yeah, a lot of dispelling myths. And then a lot of people do come to me and they're like, I'm ready to find food freedom. I'm ready to stop holding on to these rigid food rules. And I want to know, like, how am I going to nourish my body and be balanced and include foods? Like, I'm done restricting.
Yeah, yeah, which is really nice. Yeah, that they're already kind of there. And then when you do dispel the myths that are still in their brain, even if they're ready to move on, they still have these thoughts floating around. They're more open to hearing it and believing it, and then that sets the stage for doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely, and as they continue to work with me, they see their symptoms improving. They're like, "Oh, it wasn't that I needed to restrict more. Adding in things and finding balance with food is helpful, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna continue doing this." And you had mentioned, are there certain people that you're like, you have to convince? Everyone's allowed to think what they want to think, right? If and I also am a fan of placebo effect, to be honest.
Mhm.
Because if
Same.
something is helping you, who am I to say if it's not hurting or harming in any way or illegal, yada, yada, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, if it's not harming me, it's not harming you. And you find that smelling lemon balm in the morning cures your nausea. Why would I
Yes.
get in the way of that?
Yeah. If it is getting you to eat breakfast, then please do that. As long as
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's nuance to it, right? I am not here to fight with any of my clients. If and even I do have clients who are like, "No, intermittent fasting is working for me." Then I encourage them, like your functional doctor said, to do it during the nighttime hours and find a time for you to nourish your body adequately during the daytime within the hours that you are allowed to eat then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because, it's hard then it makes that time period so much shorter depending on if you're working or not, like, where are you gonna find the time to fit all of the fiber and all of the meals and all of the nutrients in?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I'm working with clients kind of before they get to you because 'cause I'm working with them when they're way, way, like, not open yet to, like, changing some of the diet things that, you mentioned, like, if it's working for you, it feels great, then go for it, but I think a lot of people are doing some things that they've convinced themselves is going to make them feel great, but they're not feeling great yet, but they have a strong belief that this will work if they can just be consistent with it.
And what are those things that you're seeing? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, it might be, well, eliminating vegetables, going more carnivore, and I'm careful to say that because I do know people who, like, very, very strongly have seen success on the other side of that. Now, I think there's long-term consequences with that. I always tell them,
But
"I'm not a dietitian, so I can't tell you, like, isn't or isn't gonna work, but yeah, it will be something like that, or it would be fasting, or even honestly, and this is something that it's almost never said, I have to prompt my clients by specifically saying, "Are you eating enough calories?" Because most of the time they're not, and they're like, calorie counting is a thing, like,
yep.
not trying to go down the calorie counting path to lose weight, but I
Mhm.
actually, and this would be counterintuitive for someone with an eating disorder, but if that's not a concern, then I will say count your calories for 2 days. Like, you should be eating around 2,000
Enough.
calories a day.
Yeah,
Enough. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, 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 absolutely. So really, yeah,
Yeah.
making
And
sure that
then
people are eating enough is my number one concern because, like I said, your GI system will not work without
yeah.
it.
Yep. And then, like I was saying with my own experience, it was like I needed to make sure that I was just eating, like you were saying too, just eating these 3 meals plus snacks a day. Then I can focus on, like, whether I want to increase my protein or decrease
Yeah.
my fat, and I am playing around with fat content now because I am noticing, like, oh, when I do have a lot of fat, like, it actually does change the way I go to the bathroom and things like
Yeah.
that. So, but it's from such a grounded place, and it doesn't mean I'm fearful of fat and I've cut it out again. It just means I'm gonna pay attention to this. Like, yeah,
You're applying gentle nutrition. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Just inquisitively curiosity, versus I should. And
Mhm.
this is the way. And I must do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You're making an informed decision around caring for your health.
Yeah. I love this. Is there anything else, any kind of big topic that you love talking about that we haven't addressed yet, in this area?
Oh, so much.
I know.
I feel like we could go on and on. We covered some really great points, and I think when it comes to caring for your gut health, it has more to do with eating enough and then focusing on variety versus eliminating potential triggers.
I love that. Eating enough and adding variety. That's really
That's why I'm the inclusive IBS dietitian, because we want to include things into your diet.
I love it. Where can people find you?
Oh, yeah. So on Instagram and I think all the things, I'm at inclusive.ibs.dietitian. My name's Samina Qureshi, so I'm sure if you type in Samina IBS dietitian, I'll be there as well. You can click on my profile. And yeah, I'm accepting people now in my 12-week IBS food freedom program where I help you find relief from these uncomfortable digestive symptoms, confidently nourish your body, and feel your best.
I love that. Is there anything, if people aren't sure, if they haven't been following you, is there anything maybe like a free download that you have or somewhere where they can find, like they can kind of learn what the prerequisite is to this, to your program,
Yeah.
so to
Yeah,
speak?
yeah, absolutely. I have a free download. It is an IBS guide on 5 ways to avoid IBS flares. And it really breaks it down to some, again, things that you can do to care for your basic human needs that will help you reduce that stress and anxiety, which in turn will help your digestive system function optimally. And so, yeah, check it out. There's some simple tips for you to apply into your daily routine today to help you get on and see how that impacts your symptoms.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Samina. This was really wonderful.
Thanks for having me. I had so much fun.
Thanks for listening. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need. And lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do if you found this episode helpful. And P.S., clicking subscribe ensures you'll be here for the next episode. See you then!